Hi, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing? Good? I'm doing good. It's hot. It's hot. Even though it's spring, I always have to make my comments on the weather. It's like when it's freezing, it's like, I can't wait till it warms up. And now it's like, oh, what was I thinking? But yeah, it's considering it's spring here in Florida and even in northern. It's really weird. The other day at night, it went down to the 60s. And I was like, okay. But then, of course, it hasn't hit the 90s, but it's high 80s. And let me tell you something. I think it's the worst is when it's hot and there's no breeze, like nothing. That's when you're like, my chickens look at me like, help. Like you could tell they're like, they go in the shade and they like, you could tell them everybody's quiet. Everybody quiets down. My dogs, I set them out. I don't even have to call them in. Everybody runs back in. Like they do their thing and they run back. Other times I'm like, hey, come back here. Because they run all over the place. Not anymore. Not when it's hot. They come in here instantly. And then they lie down, on the cold floor and they're like, thanks. Yeah. It's like, in other words, it's not just me. Yeah, we're all weather wimps. But, oh, and then everybody wanted me to follow up with this thing about my pigeons. I took out my two pairs, I paired them up. And, okay, I tried one type of nest. Because everybody makes, the pigeon people have asked, pigeons are kind of hardy. And yeah, they are. They're great, as far as that. But I put in one type of nest that didn't like it. They knocked the egg out. Okay, I got another type of nest that's supposed to be for pigeons. Okay. And then they laid the eggs, but they insist on putting it on the floor and, and it's a grilled bottom. So it's like, okay, why are you doing this? So I spoke to a pigeon person that says, lay down some type of, if they're not using the nest so it won't break, put like a little towel or something, like maybe a wash towel, something. I did that. They kind of lay on it and then it rolls around because of course that's what the nest is for. So I took that egg and I put it to the one underneath. Bottom line, they've broken two eggs and I've got one with just one egg. And it's actually sitting on the nest, which I'm very happy about. But it's like so much. It's like, you guys have babies on ledges. Why are you giving me such grief on this? But yeah. And they look at me, it's like now they're kind of getting used to me, especially when I come around with the food. And believe it or not, it's really funny. But I've never been up that close with pigeons. And they're intelligent. They look at you and you're talking to them. Of course, I've given them names. Absolutely, So they're all looking at me and they already know, like they're looking at me when I'm working with the other birds and I'm coming like, she's coming with the food and the water. Yay. That stuff. And yeah, but yeah, that's my whole pigeon odyssey thing. But let's see if soon I will have a baby pigeon to show off. I'll bring in pictures of that because it's like, man, I'm telling, as a matter of fact, no, I'll do it for my next show. My pigeon pictures, me and the pigeons and me. And like, what's the thing? Who's the master and who's an apprentice? And I'm definitely not the master. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. And the good part is who is a guest tonight at Stories of the Supernatural. And I have to laugh because I'm going to talk about her in just a minute, but we were having a moment here where we were thinking paranormal sabotage. The audio wasn't working. We're like, oh God, So it's going to be a very interesting show. But anyway, her name is Maya Zahira. She's a visionary teacher, mystic, and spiritual mentor whose mission is to educate and empower truth seekers with the most powerful and effective methods for energetic self-care, spiritual empowerment, and psychic protection. She lives near Tucson, Arizona, where she works with students all over the world via online and in-person courses and events. Help me welcome her. How are you doing today, Zaya? Maya, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Hi, Marlene. From one fellow weather wimp to another.
Yeah.
I was kind of laughing about you earlier today because I've watched a lot of your videos,
Thank you.
and I've heard about your weather stories and everything. And I have to wear a sweater and a blanket over my legs when it's 70 because
Okay.
I'm freezing. And I live in Arizona, so it's very hot today, but it's dry. But I'm
Right.
very glad for air conditioning. But my air conditioning is always at like 78, 79 because otherwise I'm
Mm-hmm.
freezing. So it's
Yeah.
very good that I don't have a roommate because they would hate it.
Let me tell you something. Me and my husband are always doing the battle, or he sneaks and he
Temperature.
puts it, and then I'm like, did you? And he's like walks away, and I do it, because of course he's it's never cold enough, and it's like I'm
Mm,
freezing. But yeah, I get it.
that's
Believe
funny.
me, I get it. I get it. That whole the weather thing. It's like, yeah, living in Florida. I grew up in South Florida, and it's hot and humid, very humid,
Mhm.
and I'm used to it. And I tell everybody, there was a time where I didn't feel deprived, and the only time we turned on AC was at night to go to sleep. The rest of the time we had
Wow.
fans. And it was fine, but because everybody was, you didn't, I don't know if it's like I said, I was a kid. I was, you just didn't think about it. And
Mhm.
everybody was there, you just handled it. And now it's like, what do you mean, a fan? No, get me the AC and put it full blast,
Yeah,
but
my air conditioner is blowing, so you guys might be able to hear it. So sorry about that. If
I
there's
tell
white
you, it's
noise.
like, no, no,
Good.
I'm telling you, but I think that of the two, the one that I cannot I'm really not tolerant is really cold weather.
Yeah.
It's like, it's, when we were moving up here, I want to tell a real short story. Before they had our home ready, it was like a few weeks. So we rented this little mobile home that was right on a creek. And it was, even though it was, what was it, January, no, February, it was in the middle of winter, or it felt like I might as well have been at
Yeah.
the Antarctic Circle. It was cold. And then come to find out, because the owners lived in another state and they would just like rent it out like a, Airbnb kind of deal. The central, the central heating wasn't working.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So we ran out and we got like a portable heater. And oh, that was the worst. We would go into the bedroom, and us and the dogs and everybody, we were like, how you see
Mhm.
like the homeless around a dumpster with a fire? This was us. Oh
Oh
my
my God.
God. And it was like, I gotta go to the bathroom. Oh my God, no, it's gonna be so. I got scarred by people can say, oh, Marlene, but no, the cold in me, nah, like that, like to live, no, 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 no. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and that was in North Florida. Can you imagine if I'd be in another state further up north? I'd be like, oh my God, no, no. But anyway, let me ask you: Do you live in Arizona?
Yes,
Because
southern Arizona.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
all right, that's the weather up there. Like because I've been I've driven through Arizona, but it's a different type of heat. It's like drier, I
It's
guess is
very
the word.
dry,
Right.
and I live in southern Arizona. What I actually lived in in and around the Kansas City area for 30
Mm-hmm.
years,
Okay.
and I became very intolerant to the cold, which is why I decided to move to
Yes.
Arizona. But I actually had never been to Arizona when I started exploring whether I wanted to move here. And so I took a couple trips out here and I found out, I learned, because I had never been here before, I learned that there are mountainous areas and then there are lower areas. So this time of year when it's hot, you can just drive up the mountain and it's really cool. There's
Right.
a mountain about 2 hours away. So there's also further north, there's a lot of mountainous regions. Um, but down south where I'm at, it's pretty hot and dry and deserty.
Okay. I like that.
Hmm. Yeah,
It
it's
always
nice. No
no. It's like
humidity.
right. Now, we were talking about something because I know that you mentioned something earlier, and
False
I like I told you I had read
false
it on your
lights.
False
Yeah,
lights. I read it on your website, and I think that's
awesome.
fascinating. Let's get into that. What is that
Let's do it.
exactly?
Okay. Yeah, I definitely think we should talk about false light entities because this is something that there's not enough information out there about this topic yet, and it's something that I have had several encounters with. So I'll just, for the benefit of everybody out there who hasn't heard that term, I'm going to give a definition. And then maybe we can go into story time because I have some really
Okay.
creepy stories.
Perfect.
So, how I define a false light entity, I use it as basically a big umbrella term for any type of dark, malevolent, negative spiritual being, entity that is pretending to be a benevolent, positive entity. So, for example, there might be a negative entity that is pretending to be somebody's spirit guide. There might be a negative entity that is pretending to be an ascended master. There might be a negative entity pretending to be an angel. Or somebody's loved one, posing as somebody's loved one. I've noticed in all my different encounters, there are different types of negative entities that tend toward this shape-shifting type of thing, this trickster type of thing. The first type of entity that tends toward the imposter kind of thing is a demon. So demons like to trick people and shapeshift into other things, try to pretend to be whatever, fill in the blank.
Yes. Yes.
And then there are discarnate human souls, so
Mm-hmm.
human spirits, ghosts. Not all ghosts are able to shapeshift because I'm sure with all of your studies, Marlene,
Well,
some
and
ghosts are very new to being in the spirit, so they don't really know
well, and
how
I'm glad you
to.
mentioned it because
Mhm.
exactly what you said. Some people somehow they can't conceive of that a spirit or whatever it is, human or
Yeah,
non-human, would be
yeah,
manipulative enough to pretend to be something else.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
like what you just said. Oh, I'm your guide. Oh, okay. And it's like, don't you
yeah.
want to? The people are very I don't know, because if it's spiritual, they automatically think it's a positive thing.
Well, the thing is, when a human being dies, they're going to be pretty similar to the personality of who they were when they were alive.
Yes.
So if they were kind of a tricky human being, or maybe they were a sociopath and they liked to mess with people, then they're probably going to want to do that sort of thing on the other side just because it's fun and it gives them
Yes.
delight to just mess with people.
Yes.
So there are some souls that have figured out how to do the shape-shifting thing, and they are having fun at the expense of some people who are using the Ouija board and think that they're contacting their grandma.
Yeah.
So that's another example of a false light entity. And then another type of being that I've noticed is very adept at shapeshifting is called a jinn. I don't know if you've had
Okay.
any encounters with
Yes.
them.
I have not, but I've heard that
Oh,
they're very trickster like. They're very good at imitating and basically they can, from what I understand, and you tell me if this is what you've heard,
mhm.
they can imitate, but not totally. They're always off a little bit. Okay,
Yeah,
like they can.
I would say that that's true. Although out of the three types of entities that I've just listed, the
Mm-hmm.
jinn are the trickiest and the
Yes.
most intelligent and the most adept at shape shifting. They, for example, jinn, and this is not just from research, but unfortunately, I've had several encounters with jinn, and I've
Okay.
had encounters in which one jinn could actually shapeshift to make itself appear as though it was an entire council of angels.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Oh,
Jin are actually, so I agree. I both agree and disagree with what you said because they're very skilled. They can pretend, I've seen them pretend to be a group of aliens wanting to channel messages. I've seen
Right.
them pretend to be a whole pantheon of gods and goddesses standing around. They
Mm-hmm.
were multiple beings. But yet you are absolutely right. Every time I've had an encounter with them, there is always something that feels or looks, if you're clairvoyant, a little bit off. And that's your key. So
Yes.
to notice those subtleties, there's always something a little bit off, which we can get into some of the
Let
indicators
me,
and
and you
signs
know
maybe
what?
later on.
There's a lot of people. I'm sure you've heard of Abraham Hicks, that she was,
Oh yes.
people that have, supposedly they channel from these ascended masters,
Hmm.
right? Let's say,
Hmm.
for example, Abraham Hicks has been around for a long time,
Yes.
and I remember listening to one time she was describing how she basically was the first time she started channeling this. And I was like, I read some of the material and it was like, there's nothing negative. But I remember when I'm listening to her, I'm thinking, oh, okay, but how did you know what this source was?
Right.
It was like, God, there's no, unless she left parts out, maybe there
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, you're very trusting in assuming that what you're channeling
Mhm.
is coming from a positive source. So,
Yes. It's
and
so interesting that you brought up Abraham Hicks, because I totally want to go down this rabbit hole for a minute, if that's okay
let's
with you.
go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I actually was just talking about Abraham Hicks last week in one of my groups. And
Okay.
first, I will just preface it by saying my overall stance is that I want to be supportive to everyone that I consider a colleague. And so I'm never out there trying to disparage anybody's work. But I do have some strong opinions about some of the channeled material out there. And this is an example. Okay, so
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Hicks is an example. So the thing that I've observed in my firsthand encounters with false light entities. Especially, I saw this with my first major encounter with a false light entity, a jinn that was
Mm-hmm.
pretending to be a council of angels. And that thing tried to kill me. I can get into that
Holy
story in a
crap.
little bit. But what I noticed was that that being through the person, the spiritual teacher, was putting forth all of these messages that sound very lovely and inspiring. And it was my observation that just like a human living sociopath who's a liar, they are not going to tell 100% lies, because no one is going to believe that BS. A
Right.
skilled liar is going to tell 80% truth and lovely, lovely sounding truth, very inspiring, and
Yes.
20% lies, or maybe 90%, 10%. But there will intentionally be some misinformation that's interwoven in. Now, the other thing that we need to ask is, why would a false light entity want to even be channeling messages to big groups of people? And as a clairvoyant myself for my whole life, uh, and then after having my very first encounter, very jarring, life altering encounter with a jinn, that actually opened up my ability to be able to see false light entities very clearly and to be able to see what they're doing. And what I
Okay.
saw was that as they're channeling messages through, like, here's the spiritual teacher has all their followers. The jinn, and this is going to sound creepy, but the jinn or the other type of false light entity is actually here at the head of the line, and they're working through this spiritual teacher and connecting to all these people. The idea is to feed off of that big network of
Yes.
of living humans. So
Sure.
it's a feeding ground. So I do understand that Abraham Hicks is really popular right now. I actually have some personal problems with some of their teachings. I do
Yeah.
find that some of the things that they teach encourage victim blaming and illness shaming. Like if you have an illness, you obviously caused it because you weren't vibrating correctly. And people who've never gone through a major life trauma or a serious illness, it's very easy for them to believe all of the Abraham Hicks stuff and say, well, that sounds true to me. It sounds very inspiring. But people who are, really struggling in the depths of despair, where they've just lost a loved one, or they're going through a major illness, and people are spouting off, quoting Abraham Hicks, it's very harmful. So from my perspective, I can see how, although these teachings seem very inspiring, they're actually very deceiving and very harmful to a lot of people. And what I think is that the teachings have taught all of the followers to forget how to have empathy for other people's suffering. Because if they're caught in this belief of, well, you don't need to suffer, you actually, if you just raise your vibration and have positive thoughts, then this problem will magically go away. So then that person isn't available to hold space and just be with their friend or their loved one.
The problem develops when people, and I know this sounds really trite, you know how you hear about the stages of grief? Yeah. You have to go through the stages of, the problem is when people get stuck, and that's my son, who can, because he's got an emergency bypass. Can I call you later? Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Because even though I have my phone on silent for my kids, and of course his timing is impeccable, but anyway, no, as far as the God, what I was talking about, the thing about the stages of grief. That the problem is when people get stuck in one, like the grief, let's say.
Yeah, you don't want to get stuck.
2 or 3 years later, you're still like,
Of course.
But you got to let people, it's the same thing with anger. It's okay to be angry. If something happens and you got to be angry.
Normal human emotions.
Yeah, you got, it's like, work it out. That's what you got it for. But it's just as bad. I'm going to say when you repress it, like what you were saying. Well, Abraham Hicks says that I shouldn't be feeling like this, so I'm just gonna like repress this whatever feeling it is and pretend it's not there, which is not a good idea. And everybody's different, by the way. We all have different emotional makeups. Some people, introverts, extroverts, some people will witness something or experience something and they're shocked and they can handle it. You get that same exact scenario with another person and they're like, oh my God. Everybody's different. So that one size fit all, that's not really good as far as human beings are concerned.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked about them. I am I am kind of opinionated about their teachings, but I'm also kind of a middle ground person that, for example, I used to read all of their books before I understood false light entities. And so there were things that I found to be helpful, like,
they're not like totally like holy. No, no, they're not.
Yeah. So I think it's possible. I think it's important actually with any spiritual material out there that you can certainly read or watch that material and take in, just use your discernment at all times. I think there's a tendency for people to think that because something is channeled, it's even more trustworthy. And I would say that the opposite is true, that if it's channeled material, you don't know who those, like, it could be, like, would you walk along the street and just trust something that some random dude tells you? It's the same thing.
This one time, and I know there's people going to be out there, Marlene, what are you doing about Reiki? I can't remember now. I can't remember who told me. This was a while back. Who was it that told me you even have to be careful, let's say, with Reiki, people doing Reiki on you, because basically they're the filter. If this person is not, despite their appearance, how's that? They're basically filtering energy through themselves, and you might not be getting what you think you're getting from that Reiki session. So everybody thinks because it's Reiki, it's Reiki, it's all good, and it's like not really. Depends who's doing it.
Yeah,
You
that's
know.
very true. I'm so glad you brought that up too. I did a video about a year ago called The Dark Side of Reiki,
Oh,
because
okay.
I had so many students who were coming to me who were telling me stories of going and having the Reiki one attunement that makes you a channel for Reiki,
Mm-hmm.
where then the Reiki master actually hooked in energy cords to them and
Hey.
siphoned life force energy. And here's the thing, this is another example of you don't have to throw everything out. We're not saying that all Reiki is bad. And we're not saying that all spiritual content or every single thing that Abraham Hicks says is terrible.
Right,
But
right.
with Reiki, you know, like you said, it's so true that you have to keep in mind who is channeling that Reiki. And when there are practitioners who are knowingly or unknowingly, because sometimes
Yes.
people are not very aware of what they're doing with their energy, even if they're a Reiki
Exactly.
master, and
Yes.
they're knowingly or unknowingly siphoning energy from their clients or doing other
Yes.
sorts of nonsense.
Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
then it ends up harming whether it's the student or the client, a client session or an attunement. And then I've had to help people undo some of the damage from that. I'm
Yeah.
actually writing my third book right now. I should be done in a couple of months, and it is all about abusive, dysfunctional, and toxic spiritual teachers. And
Oh,
there's a
psychic
section.
vampire kind of stuff.
Well, there's three categories. There's the first type of dysfunctional spiritual teacher would be like the person who has like basically a personality disorder, who's very
Mm-hmm.
abusive to their students, and there's no proper boundaries. So it's more
Yes.
like interpersonal dysfunctions. The second category would be the sexual predator who's working in the spiritual field. And the third category would be the dark healer. This is someone, let's say, like a Reiki practitioner or some other type
Mm-hmm.
of practitioner who puts up their shingle as an energy worker or a shaman, but they're
Yes.
and they put themselves forth as this positive love and light practitioner. But meanwhile, their intention is to actually hook into students and clients and to cause harm, to feed off of their energy. So it's an energy vampire type of thing. And believe me, about how many years ago was it? 7 years ago, I started getting all these clients who were having encounters with dark healers, dark shamans. And I was so shocked. I never would have imagined how common it is. It's extremely common. And just think of it this way, if someone is already a predator, if somebody already has a predatory
Yes.
personality, they're going to seek out some type of career or environment where they can find easy targets. A spiritual
Right.
community is
And
full
they,
of
that's the
trusting
thing.
people.
People think that, if you're a monster, you're going to have monster stamped on your forehead or you're going to look like a monster. It's all the contrary. They know that if they come off that way, right off,
Mhm,
people are going to run away. Yeah, there's
mhm,
always the few that are like, okay, you're
mhm.
kind of masochistic and you stick around, even though, or they're
Yeah.
on a pattern of repetition from prior relationships, whatever. But and in some of those, what you described also at the extreme are the cults. You know what
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
saying? People
Mhm.
that before you know it, they roll. It becomes everything. It becomes a spiritual, sexual. Sometimes
All of it.
everything rolls into one, and then the next thing you
Mhm.
know,
And black magic,
I'm like, yeah,
like
it's like you
all
name
of
it.
it.
Some of the things you hear about is like, man, and sometimes it's you look at some of these cults and you're like, who buys into this? And I'm thinking,
Well, but that's
uh,
the thing is usually people get involved, whether it's with a toxic spiritual teacher or an entire cult. They're usually in some type of life transition where they're going
yes.
through something difficult and they're feeling kind of lost and they're looking for answers. And that's when they
Right.
get swooped up by the bad folks.
There was this doctor, she's already passed away. Her last name was Singer. And back in the 70s and 80s, she was used a lot in, like when the Boston, no, not the Boston Strangler, the Hillside Strangler in California,
Mhm.
that he was trying to prove insanity. And she was the one that says, nah, he's not insane. Anyway, she had a lot of experience with cults. And she's saying how exactly what you just said, the answer to the followers is that they make all important life decisions for you.
Yes.
Who you marry,
Mm-hmm.
where to go, what to do, where to sleep, what to eat, what to do. And she said that, that from the people who had either left voluntarily or their families had them like deprogrammed, she says most of the time the people were malnourished because they basically spend all their time making money.
Working for the.
Working, either if it's panhandling or working or something.
Yes.
Just for, the benefit, of course, of whoever is at the top of the pyramid there. Well, maybe it's one or two people.
Yeah.
And do you remember, this was way back when Oprah many years ago had that John of God guy on?
Oh my gosh. I was just thinking about him earlier today. I literally, because when I was living in Kansas City, there were a whole group of my colleagues who were totally into John of God. And I've always had this spidey sense about who's not good. And they were all saying, oh, you need to come. On this trip, we're going to go on a trip and go visit him. And we go every year. And I was like, no, I was like, well, what is so great about this guy? I looked him up online. I pulled his picture. I pulled up the website. I saw his picture and I immediately knew Predator.
Yes.
Predator. And I never went on those trips, but I didn't mean to interrupt you. You were probably
no. He had, that's what I'm saying. This guy had the spiritual healing center in Brazil, like what you said. He even got an Oprah. Turns out the guy's a serial rapist and you name it. The worst things.
Awful. Just awful. But here's the thing. Let's talk about the entities that he worked with.
So there you go. Let's go there.
He worked with a group of entities. Now, I would not define them as false light entities because I think they were just presenting as they were. They were just like different spiritual beings. They weren't pretending to be angels or whatever. But I always would ask, like, why would I want some random entities working on me? Because even the colleagues in Kansas City would say, oh, his entities will heal you. And I'd be like, I don't want some weird entities healing me. Like, I don't know who they are.
Right.
But here's the thing. A lot of people have this belief that negative entities can't heal a person. But this is a perfect example that where John of God there were actually several healings. The author Wayne Dyer was healed by.
I didn't know Wayne Dyer was healed by him. Really?
Yes, he was healed by him. He, I don't remember all the details, but he had cancer.
Yes, I remember that.
Yes, and he was healed. And there are other prominent spiritual leaders who also experienced healings with him. And
I did not know that.
So, but here's the thing is like, well, he was clearly working with very, in my opinion, very evil, malevolent entities because those beings were prompting him. I mean, I think he had his own darkness in him to begin with in order to agree to do the egregious things that he did. But I also think he was surrounded by dark, dark beings because it was kind of a collective effort. And that's often what happens where just apply this to any example of
he got arrested just only like in 2019, like 5 years ago. He was doing that spiritual center in Brazil for like decades. I mean, he was there for a long time. Yeah, from what I understand, like 200 or 300 women accused him of rape or sexual whatever.
Yeah,
and those are the ones that stood up and said something. Can you imagine, really, in reality?
Yeah,
how many he might have. And you know what? And you know what? I've heard even on a much smaller scale, some of these so-called, whatever you want to call them, priest or when I say priest, I don't mean like Catholic. I mean like, whether they call themselves a spirit minister.
Different people in spiritual authority.
Let me tell you something. And sometimes I'm thinking you can't be, the part of the healing, I have to have sex with you. It's like, really? How does that work?
There are individuals in all paths who have tried that nonsense.
And by this, and the reason I'm differentiating real quick, Maya, is to say, because people think of the rape as forcing somebody. But if you tell somebody, let's say somebody
Mental
that's,
manipulation.
you know, in other words, this woman was not going to have sex with you unless you're telling her what you're telling her, which is for me to heal you or whatever it
Yep.
is I'm doing for you. We need to
Mm-hmm.
have sex. All right. That's not a
Yep.
rape technically, but at the same time, it is, like you said,
It is coercion. There
it's
wasn't
coercion.
true. This
Yeah.
is one thing I talk about in my book that's coming out. It's not true consent when
Yes,
there is
exactly.
coercion. And
Right.
we had this guy in Kansas City, which well, obviously I'm not going to name his name, but I think he was in his 70s, and he would surround himself with these young women, 18, 19, 20, 21 years old, and he would tell them that they were special and that they had such a bright light.
Mm-hmm.
He would love bomb them and tell them how amazing they are, that they have a special soul mission in this lifetime. And oh, by the way, your sacral chakra is blocked. And the only way to unblock your sacral or your sexual chakra is to have sex with me. And I will heal that for you. And there were so many women who got
Yes.
pulled
Yeah.
into that because they were
Yes.
young, and some of them were autistic and developmentally disabled,
There you
which I
go.
think is
Yes.
even more
Even worse. Even worse. Of
horrible
course. Right.
because
Their
they didn't
discernment
understand.
of like, hey, sounds like a bunch of
Right,
BS to me.
right.
It's like, yeah.
It was awful. I mean, it was just true. I mean, I think that when people abuse their spiritual power like that, it's just
Yes.
I think it's evil. It
Yeah,
is just
sure.
evil.
And this is, and by this, but by the way, I know there's women out there that they're not being coerced. And if you want to have sex with the guru guy, go for it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
If you know
that's
what
their
you're doing,
decision. Right.
whatever,
Yeah, you have
I'm not talking about,
Yeah,
but that,
we're definitely not doing any sex shaming or
no, no,
anything
no,
like
no, no.
that.
But what I'm saying is,
Nothing like
it's
that.
when you're either raped or in this case you're misled, like what you just said. For you to be healed or whatever.
Hmm.
Even worse,
Hmm.
I would think if, like you said, whether the person's got a disability or what if they're sick and they're being told, you know what,
Oh my God.
I sense either they're really sick or they're being told, there's something here and we're gonna get rid of it, but my
Hmm.
penis is the one that's gonna do the work.
The
It's like,
magic
yeah,
wand. Oh my
yeah,
God.
exactly. But yeah,
Yeah.
and I know we laugh at it, but anyway,
No.
the
Well,
getting
yeah.
back to these
Sometimes.
things
Yeah.
about these because a lot of uh and then when you said that, I think that's really important, that you can have a dark spirit that can actually do something beneficial,
Hmm.
okay, as or
But
an
it's not.
enticement.
It seems that it's doing something beneficial, but then the agreement. This is what I've seen clairvoyantly. The agreement is that then that person is still permanently hooked to that entity, and that entity gets to feed off of them.
Right, like a quid pro quo, like,
Yes,
but they might not know that they're
right,
getting that quid pro quo kind of
exactly.
deal.
They don't know.
Yes, but I agree that
Mm,
a lot of times people equate bad entities, human or non-human.
mhm,
We think of the Hollywood version, you start talking in tongues or furniture flies around. And
mhm.
sometimes it's not like that. It's like exactly what you explained, the psychopath, the sociopath, where
Yep.
they're on their best behavior and they want to get you on their side. And then this guy does things for you, makes you feel better. Who knows?
Mhm.
And you're like thinking, oh my God, this is great. I feel wonderful. Like, especially if you being told you're a wonderful person, you're let's face it, nobody likes
That's
rejection. Everybody likes
called
admiration.
that's called grooming
Of
in
course.
sexual abuse. It's
Yes.
called grooming, where the targeted individual, the victim, is told how wonderful they are. Maybe they're even given gifts, treated
Yes.
very special. You're the special one.
And you
But
know
the
what?
whole idea is to warm them up and butter them up so that little by little more and more boundaries can be crossed. And
But
that's
you
how the
know
abuse
what's
occurs.
really funny is that they also know how to pick and choose. They see,
Oh, yeah.
they notice, they develop a sixth sense of
Mm.
when, let's say, they meet people. Let's say at a conference or people come to hear 'em. They already know. Oh, that one, no, that one's giving me a hard stare. Like, I'm not going to be able to come. But this was hurting for attention,
Yeah,
or this person
absolutely.
maybe's been rejected. Yeah, they already choose who are the ones, and they develop right away this sense of who I can pull this off on. And unfortunately, you know, like what you were saying, friends, that they're thinking, oh, this guy's a spiritual teacher. He would never do anything bad, or manipulative. It's like, yeah.
Well, and
Yes.
then also the rest of the community around that person also thinks, oh, this spiritual teacher, they wouldn't possibly be doing something negative like that. So the community and the colleagues will often support the predator instead
Sure.
of the victims.
Yes. Yeah. They're like very bought into there's a there's oh my god, what was this group I saw it the other day? Oosh. That the woman, even though it was a couple, the one that was running the show was the woman. That's
Yeah.
another thing people don't realize. That's not
Mhm.
always. I've seen
It's not
the
just men.
there's
Mhm.
it's already a few years old, back in the 60s and 70s, when the Process Church came out into, from the UK into United States into the Southwest area. There was a couple, and originally they were a couple and they established it, but in, like about 4 or 5 years after they had, gone, because they basically established themselves in major cities, I kicked them to the curb. And in other words, she was the one who was, and I guess I'm saying this as a cautionary tale. Don't always think that it's a man
Right.
who can be predatory in these type of scenarios where it's either you're talking a spirituality or anything like that. You can get a woman that can be sometimes worse. I hate to say it.
Mhm.
When it comes to being the head of a let's cult or whatever it is,
Mhm.
whatever the case might be,
Yeah.
where or they are the enforcers for the head guy also.
And that's true. And also, specifically regarding sexual predators in the spiritual world, there are individuals of all genders that are predatory. So it's not just men.
Yes,
And
yes. Mm-hmm.
in my book, I share a few stories of some women who were spiritual leaders
Yes.
doing all sorts of stuff.
Well, no, that's the thing. And I think sometimes women think that another woman would not do it. It's like, yeah, this has nothing to do with whether you're a man or a woman. This has to do with
Mhm.
personality, with who
Mhm.
you are.
Yeah.
If this person was a man, I mean, it doesn't, it's not like being a woman doesn't, exclude you from coming under suspicion. If
Mhm.
all of a sudden this person uh is same thing, covering for, you know, making you do things, or being I've seen scenarios where after a while, and you hear from people that have left cults, where maybe the figurehead or the throne is a man, but really the one that's running it behind the scenes is
Mhm.
the woman, and she's the enforcer.
Mhm.
And a lot of people think, oh, it's a woman. It's like, women, women can, and I'm not going to use that word, but it rhymes
Mhm.
with witch. It's like,
Well,
so
any human being
yes.
can choose to misuse their spiritual power, their spiritual abilities, and their leadership.
Let me ask you, because I think when you, getting back to what you were talking about, the jinns,
Yes.
some people have heard of them, but they're not really familiar with them.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Did you go somewhere and you pick one up? How
Yeah.
did that
I want
happen?
to tell this story.
Go ahead.
Let's do the story.
Okay.
Okay. So prior to 2016,
Mm-hmm.
I had been working for about 25 years as a feel-good spiritual teacher. I was doing like relaxing Reiki sessions and
Right.
um, you know, empowerment retreats and all these wonderful things. I actually had never even heard of jinn. I didn't even know what it was. I knew what demons were, but I had never heard of jinn until I accidentally had an encounter with one. And again, this was back in 2016. And I went to a colleague for a consultation. Wanted her I wanted to get a second opinion on some things that I was noticing spiritually. But I had no idea what would happen when I went to this person, because she seemed very sweet and very genuine and trustworthy. And she said that she worked with a council of angels. And so what happened was, after I went to a one-on-one session, and then I also went to one of her group, quote, healing sessions, where all of us were gathered together in a room, and she brought forth the angels, air quotes, and the angels did healings on us. After that, after the group session thing, I went home, and the next day was when all hell broke loose. As soon as I woke up in the morning, there were entities all over my room. And here's the thing, I mentioned before that I've been clairvoyant and all the clairs my whole life. But I wouldn't just wake up and there were 25 entities in my room. Like that was very abnormal. So I'm like very shocked. All of a sudden there's like all these entities first thing in the morning, and I'm like, what is happening? And then I was seeing so I was seeing all sorts of beings. I was seeing fairies and elementals. And then in the days that came after
everybody showed up?
I was seeing, yeah, it was like the room was full. It was so weird. And by the way, I have never been diagnosed with schizophrenia or anything like that. My mental health state is very good. But someone hearing this story, not knowing me, would be like, this person was experiencing psychosis, because all of a sudden you're seeing all these things that aren't there. Well, then I was seeing demons in my house. And then... So there were other things besides clairvoyant situations. There were lights flashing. Excuse me, lights flashing. I also did a video for my students where I was teaching them some concepts, and I watched the playback of the video when I was done, just to make sure it was all okay. And I literally saw over my shoulder there was this energy that started off really small and got bigger and bigger and bigger. The entity that I didn't know was a jinn yet. I hadn't figured out what was happening. It actually accumulated over my shoulder. It was on the camera. It was this like pulsating plasma energy on camera. Wildlife was acting really weird. The birds in my yard were like coming and almost attacking me and squawking. I was having periods of missing time where all of a sudden several hours had gone by, and I would be like, and the weather, like after the missing time, all of a sudden the weather was completely opposite of how it had been before. I was having all these like weird, like time bending kinds of things. All of that is very common with jinn, but I didn't know that. I didn't even know what a jinn was.
Did you realize right away that it was because of that visit to that woman?
No.
Or did it take you a while to like, oh, wait a minute?
It took me, I was under attack for 6 weeks.
Okay.
I started, this was beyond anything I had ever heard of before. I knew, I was very familiar that like, if you're being attacked by a spirit, I knew, okay, lights flashing, there's some paranormal stuff going on. But this level of like, it was all this layers of chaos and weirdness. It was beyond what I had ever encountered before. And I was reaching out to some of my colleagues and asking them, for help. And I was getting a lot of responses that were very Abraham Hicks responses. Well, you created your own reality, so there must be some darkness within you.
AKA, we don't know what the is up with you. It's like, instead of saying that, it's like, yeah, all right.
Exactly. And then the major part of the story is that after about 6 weeks, I suddenly figured out where this was coming from. Because honestly, I never would have guessed that it was this very sweet lady.
Was it intentional or unintentional on her part?
Well, I will get to that in a minute.
Okay.
I'll end with that part. But
Okay.
I had just been doing some yoga. I was stretching on the floor because I was so anxious. I was like
Okay.
seeing all these entities, all this stuff is going on. I'm trying to calm myself. So I got on the floor. I stretched for like 30 minutes. I stood up, and I had bought one of her books at
Okay.
this group thing, and it was just sitting there on the counter. And because I was so relaxed from doing the stretching, I suddenly saw the book with all new eyes. And I saw, like, on the book cover, it was angel wings and all these clouds. And all of a sudden, I saw that there were like 50 different demon faces
Oh
in the
my God.
clouds on the cover of the book. And then all of a sudden I went, oh my God, this thing is coming from her. But I had to call up a friend and talk to my friend for like 2 hours and recount everything. And I kept saying, but I can't believe it's from her because she's so nice and I don't want to
Right.
believe this about her. And then later that day, I texted one of her students because I was concerned about her. I thought, oh my gosh, this poor girl has been under attack and she's probably going through what I'm going through and she doesn't understand it. And she was much younger than me. So I sent her a text and I didn't tell her exactly who. I just said, please be careful of any mentors that you're working with right now. We should talk soon about this in person. And so I basically gave her a warning, and
Okay.
that text message, I think, was what caused me to be horribly attacked that night,
Oh,
uh,
for sure. Of
at a
course.
level that was way beyond uh, all of the rest of the attack, because it
Uh-huh.
was the middle of the night. I was sound asleep, and something jerked my body and woke me up. And I am 1000% sure I was totally awake, because I remember my eyelids like flying open, like
Uh-huh.
wide eyed. And I'm laying on my back and I see this plasma like energy entity hovering above me. And even though it was a formless energy, it
Mm-hmm.
actually, um, on either side of its energy, it kind of reached forward. It didn't really look like arms, but the energy reached forward and into my shoulders. It reached into my body and yanked, and it tried to pull my soul out of my body. I can't
Wow.
even describe what that feels like. It wasn't painful. It was just jarring,
Yes.
so jarring. And I had when I was younger some demonic encounters. So I wasn't easily scared by things, but this scared the crap out of me to the point where I actually immediately covered my face. I turned onto my side and curled up into a ball, and I was hyperventilating, and I was too afraid to even move. And I stayed that way until dawn, which was, I think, about 2 hours later. And then I picked up the phone, I called my friend, and I was crying so and like
Yeah, of course.
hyperventilating so much I couldn't even tell her what was going on, because when it was hovering above me, at first it was formless, and then it started to take on this like subtle, it started to kind of stretch out like it had wings, like it was an angel, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I called my friend and I was like, I am so confused. Was that an angel? What was it? And it was somebody else in my world at that time who pointed out, this is the jinn. This is classic jinn behavior. All of the chaos, like it's trying to F with your head. It's trying to, totally
Okay.
confuse you. Missing time, animals, wildlife, all of that. Classic jinn. So once I figured out what I was dealing with, then I did a couple of methods, which I'll just let people read my book to get into like all the step-by-step methods of what I did. My first book is Darkness Disguised as Light. But I did a
Okay.
few steps to get that entity out. I will give people a warning, though. Out of all the different kinds of entities that I've worked with over the years, jinn are definitely the trickiest, and they are I will call them psychopaths. They don't respond to boundaries very well. Okay. If you get in their face and do like exorcism style yelling at
Mm-hmm.
them,
Right.
they will lash back in a way that's very unpleasant, because I tried doing that when I had another encounter with a jinn in
Okay.
2020 when I went to a New Age bookstore, and that thing followed me home. And I was very forceful in trying to make it leave. And long story short, my cat was dead within a couple of days. So these things are not, you don't just scream at them and tell them to leave and do,
So let me ask you,
the
do you
whole,
think this lady, did she, I guess
yes.
this is,
I'm glad
did
you came
she,
back to that question. Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out if she was like totally blamed this. I don't know.
Well, I have some thoughts on this.
Okay.
So we'll probably never know for sure
Okay.
if she truly fully knows or not. But I think that she suspects that something might be off, but she's literally given the last 30 years of her life to this being, or the supposed council of beings. And I think that if she were to realize what was really happening, that it was one malevolent jinn hooking into her whole network of students, I don't think that mental health wise that she could handle it. And I think that I'm not trying to make an excuse, but I think sometimes
Right.
human beings often will go into denial because they don't want to believe. And I
Of
think
course. And
that's
you're talking
probably,
30 years that she's like, oh my God.
yeah, I really think she's been in service to this entity. It hasn't,
But you know
and also
what?
I had a dream a couple of months after I cleared that
How did you
attack
do
in
that? How did,
2016.
when, like you said, obviously you realize this is not the,
Mhm,
like
mhm,
it's not a one
mhm.
size fit all. How did you get this thing to unlatch from you?
Yeah. So I do go into step by step detail in
Okay.
my book,
All right.
but I'll
Okay.
say this: I used I'll for the benefit of your audience, I'll give one really easy tip that
Mm-hmm.
if anyone has any kind of malevolent entity, one of the easiest things that you can do, that might not get rid of an entity permanently, but it'll at least weaken it, and you can get your head above water and figure out what the heck else to do, is
Mm-hmm.
to burn frankincense resin.
Okay.
And that is, again, it's not a magic pill. It's not going to fix everything forever, but you don't have to have any special knowledge or skills. You can just burn it. And that's why I like it, because if somebody comes to me and they have really no skills in setting energetic boundaries or doing any kind of elaborate rituals, they can at least burn frankincense. And most entities don't like it, and it will at least cause them to move out of the space for a period of time. But I was
Because
going
I'm
to tell
trying to
you,
think, did this thing, did you send it back? I guess, and the reason is because I've heard sometimes of these
mm,
entities leaving their original person and trying to latch on to like a new person.
oh, it was not trying to latch onto me as its new person. I feel
No.
very certain of that. It was very attached to her,
Okay.
and because it had been for many, many years. I think it saw
Okay.
me as a threat because I was able to
I understand now. I
discern.
understand.
But I had
Okay.
a dream a couple of months after clearing it. And because there was this part of me that's, I'm a really nice person, and I worried about her. And I thought, should I tell her? She seems like such a nice person. And so the dream that I had answered that question. In the dream, I walked into a metaphysical New Age bookstore, gift shop, and I saw her there, and she smiled and she looked really nice, like she usually presents herself. And I thought, oh, I should go ahead and tell her what's really going on. And so in the dream, I went ahead and I told her what was going on with this entity. And immediately her eyes turned black. And in the dream, I immediately knew that I was in major life threatening danger. And
Okay.
when I woke up, I said, okay, I get it. I get the point. It is
Yeah.
not safe to tell this person. I do have a
Yeah.
lot of premonition type dreams, and I've learned
That's
to
right.
listen to those
It's
dreams.
like, lady, you're on your own. And in case,
Yeah.
because for all you know, maybe she was on. Because see, and this is the thing.
Mhm,
She's been doing this for 30 years.
mhm.
I'm sure she must have had feedback from other people that had kind of a similar experience with you.
Well, here's a pattern that I was noticing with some of
Okay.
her people is that they would go to her because she said that she specialized in helping people who were under attack.
Oh, okay.
So here's where it got really tricky is people who would be under mild attack, let's say, or
Okay.
severe attack would reach out to her for help.
All
And
right.
then her entity would ramp up the attack. And then
Okay.
here's what happened with me before I realized that it was coming from her and her dude.
Right.
I was reaching out to her and saying, "Help! I need help!" Like everything just went crazy because originally I went to her because I wanted her opinion on a mild psychic attack that I was
Right.
noticing,
And all of a sudden
and
it
I was
went to
like,
0 to 60,
it
and you're like,
went
what?
0 to 60 like overnight. And she's like, okay, I'll help you. I'll do a clearing session and da da da. And then sometimes she would totally go MIA and I would be desperate to get a hold
Okay.
of her. And
Okay.
it was all, I think it was all intentional. It's like to get you to need her or
Right.
like, and it's not just her. I think this is a common tactic. This is a very
Right.
common tactic. So to
Sure.
get you to need the practitioner, and
Sure.
meanwhile, it's the practitioner who is the agent of
Wow.
darkness.
I'll think about it. It's like you need care,
Mhm.
not a cure. In other words, if I get rid of your whatever is bothering you, well, that's it. You're going to say, thanks. That was wonderful. I'll come back and hopefully I'll never see you again because I will not have another psychic attack.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You know?
But if I can be having constant emergencies and continuing
Yes,
to reconnect with her, then the entity gets to continue to directly feed.
exactly. Exactly. And you're
Mhm.
right. You're absolutely
Pretty
right.
creepy.
And but yeah, which leads me to believe without knowing the particulars that she was in on it. How's this?
I
That
I think
she,
I think that I think there's a common thing that happens when
mm-hmm,
someone is working with a false light entity. I've heard a lot of people that I've helped over the years talk about this phenomenon, and it's when the false light entity's facade will slip for a split second. So let's
okay,
say they're meditating and they're connecting with their being, whoever it is, ascended master so and so, or in her case, the angels. And for just a moment, all of a sudden, the image of what it's supposed to be shifts and it looks like something scary instead. And
mm-hmm,
I just have this feeling like she has had a couple of glimpses or feelings, like instinctual feelings, or even seen glimpses of what this being actually is. But
right.
like I mentioned before, it's human nature that, oh no, I don't want to really believe that.
No,
That's unbelievable. And actually, if I hadn't gone through what I went through, I probably would have trouble believing it.
do you
You
think,
know?
is there such a thing as, I don't know if you've heard of tulpa or thought
Yes,
forms?
thought form
Do
entities. Yeah.
Right. Do you believe that, because the idea of the tulpa is that basically it becomes it becomes self-aware. In other words, it breaks away from the original human that created
Yes.
it.
Yes.
Have you had experiences with people coming to you where basically they have a negative thought form that they might have,
Yes.
maybe sometimes it comes from another person's, or that
Yes.
even they themselves created, and then all of
Yes.
a sudden it's gotten away from them?
Yes. Yes.
What happened?
Yes. Yes. And yes. Yes.
Okay.
So just to clarify for your listeners, we're now talking
Yes.
about thought form entity, which is
Yes.
totally different than a false light entity.
Yes.
So a tulpa or a thought form entity is a type of spiritual being that originally was created through either focused thought and intention and
Mm-hmm.
or spells, black magic, etc. It can be
Yes.
created in any of those ways. It could be created by a person and sent to someone else for
Mm-hmm.
either protection or attack. Or a person can end up, with their own ruminations, their own like obsessive thought loops constantly
Yes.
going,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they end up creating their own thought form entity, their own tulpa that hangs out in their energy field. And
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
I've actually worked with clients who've had that. They were
There you
sure that they
go.
had an entity attachment, and they did, because a thought form entity is an entity, but it
Yeah.
was actually created by them, by their unhealed
Yes.
inner
Yeah,
aspects.
people don't realize that to create a tulpa, you do need some type of obsessive thought, like that
Yes,
hamster wheel to create it. And
yes.
those are the people that's like, "Ah," and then before you know it, there you go, and
Uh-huh.
it becomes part of you, but not really. And then
Yes.
maybe it's what you're talking about. All of a sudden, they believe, hey, I'm being haunted or whatever. I'm being affected by something, and it's like, it's yours. It's yours.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's yours.
it's actually your own stuff. And I've had to explain that to certain people before when they were convinced that they had a demon.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I've always been really good at, except for when I didn't know what a jinn was. But I've always had that ability to just discern spirits. And it's a very strong ability. So when someone comes to me, I'm able to see, this is a demon, or this looks like a demon, but I know 100% this is not actually a demon. This is a thought form entity that's making itself look like whatever, fill in the blank, a demon or a whatever.
Right.
Um,
Yes.
so,
Yes.
and
Yeah. That because some people think that's not possible, but it is. Especially if, like you said, somebody that really like ruminates on something and a lot.
uh, yeah.
That can happen when this. Let me tell you something. This thing of these false light entities. I'm surprised that more people don't talk about this, Maya, because it's there.
Uh-huh.
And so many people just like buy into it, hook, line, and sinker. I'm gonna deviate a little bit, with all these people that do the ghost hunting. Oh, it's a
Yeah.
little kid. And I was like, yeah. You tell me it's a
No,
little kid, and I go, you know why? Because
those are the freakiest.
well, no, let's face it. Most human beings, tell them it's a child, especially a dead child, everybody's guard comes down. Oh, it's a kid. Oh my God. What
Uh-huh.
happened to you? All your things. And it's like, you know what? No, 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 no. Because, and again, we circle back to that thing that people sometimes, for some reason, have a hard time believing that there's entities there that are manipulative enough
Yeah.
to pretend to be something else than what they really are,
Yeah.
including
Yeah.
being a
Well,
child.
yeah, because let's think logically here. Um, the spiritual world is similar to humanity. There's the whole spectrum. There are people that are very, very good and altruistic. There are people who
Mm-hmm.
are a mixture of, maybe complicated, some good, some bad. One person could have some really bad shadow sides to them,
Sure.
but they're mostly good. And then there are people who are just true evil. And
Yes.
so this whole idea that I think in like the new age world, especially, there's this idea that all entities are benevolent, are
Mm-hmm.
good and
Yes.
nice and can be trusted. And it's like, that is just not true. There are
Mm-mm.
actually, I would say there's probably even, as far as the beings that are contacting humanity,
Yes.
there are probably more negative ones
Yes.
than positive, because the ones that are hanging out on the astral realm are just the lower vibration beings
Yeah, this
in
is
the
like the
first place
wild,
anyway.
wild west out there.
Yes, it is.
And where you hear that from? People that are experienced remote viewers. They'll tell you
Mm-hmm.
that you have to be really careful because
Mm-hmm.
what you encounter out there, it's not like butterflies and daffodils. What you
Mm-hmm.
can come across if you don't know what you're doing can be quite negative.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think that, oh, it's like no man's land in more ways than one. But
Mm-hmm.
the and I'm glad you mentioned that thing, because when the new age movement came about, it's everything is spiritual is all positive and whatever, but there's a dark side to it. Not the New Age in and of itself, but what you can dabble in
Uh-huh.
that can boomerang on you in a very bad way.
Yeah, well, just like what we said before, we don't have to throw everything out,
No.
but there are definitely some problematic things in the New Age. And I wanted to also say, for several years after after my initial major encounter with that jinn in 2016, I was all about like, oh, it's all like very infested in the New Age, blah blah blah, which is true. There's a ton of false light infested into all of the stuff that New Agers are working with. But what I've also come to find out, which I don't know, I almost find this part more disturbing because I was raised Catholic, I was raised Christian. I have had encounters with false light entities in Christian churches.
Sure.
And there was this one time when I was in a Christian church and I was just sitting there. I was on the end and listening to the person speaking in the front area. And all of a sudden something hits me really hard on the head. And it happened so suddenly that I was, and it hurt. And I said, ow, I covered my head with my hand. And I looked up and I saw it was like the jinn that had attacked me in my bed, except for it was huge. It was covering the entire congregation. And here's what blew my mind was that it was pretending to be God. And
you must have been like, what?
It blew my mind because I had this belief before that, like, yes, there's all this trickster stuff going on, but I never imagined that, like, quote, the real God would allow anything to pose as God.
I guarantee
this thing was in
that
the
church had been
church.
deconsecrated somehow. Guaranteed, whether it was somebody that went into that church or maybe even some of the, I don't know if you're talking a Catholic church.
Well, that church was a Christian church.
Okay. Whether it was one of the clergy or somebody, I guarantee for you to see that in a church, somebody deconsecrated that, whether it was through ceremonies or doing something after hours. In other words, although otherwise you wouldn't. And this is, a lot of people don't realize that is why you will have a lot of these occult ceremonies. People don't, and I'm talking about dark magic. I'm not talking it's like,
right.
They
like
will gravitate towards churches, even if it's older churches or the abandoned. But I mean, you will even have as a matter of fact, murders. It's almost that. But really, the one that what we're talking about is not that there's signs of deconsecration, because all you have to do is get it reconsecrated. It's that they do that after hours when nobody's there.
Right.
All right. Course. Okay. And like I said, it's either somebody there or sometimes, I hate to say it, it's the actual clergy.
Right.
All right. That, will get up on the pulpit and nobody knows that they might be leading a double life. This is me being a kind of a cynic, because there's a lot of clergy out there that are wonderful, that are great. But a lot of that position sometimes places them to have availability of people that are in need, that are going through some time extreme emotional or something's going on with them. And they if you get like that psychopath, sociopath flavor to them, they take advantage and nobody knows about it.
Well, and it's just like what we were talking about with like predatory people in the spiritual communities.
Yes.
It's the same thing in organized religion. There are predators there that, they are drawn to work with people who are in a vulnerable position.
Yes. And I'm going to say it. Catholic Church. I'm Catholic. I was Catholic. Went to 12 years of Catholic school.
Catholic. Yeah.
So I mean, I tell everybody, when I was growing up and I went through 12 years of Catholic school, so I got Catholic And from Irish nuns of all things, you know. So I got it for 12 years, all the way until I was like 17 years old when I graduated.
Mhm.
And for me, it was a very positive experience, but I'm not going to take away when you hear all these cases that have come out about the sexual abuse of children from these
Yeah.
priests, that you ask, okay, how did they get away with it for so many years? Because nobody wanted to speak out against them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to. I mean, I've even heard of police departments that were told, hey, be quiet. And, you know, that's when they would get the priest and transfer them to another parish. But again, this happened, I want to say outside of the Catholic Church, even in other types of denominations,
Yes.
where people, you know, the minister or anybody took advantage of their position. And sometimes nobody ever found out about it or went on for years. But bottom line, getting back to what you were saying, when this takes place in some place of worship, basically that's why it allows for things like that to manifest, that you must have been like, what? You know, what's this doing here?
And that's only one. I know we don't have time for every story. That's only one story of an encounter in a Christian church.
No,
I mean, it's kind of mind blowing.
exactly. Yes, that you would think, what in the is that? You know.
Well, and you would. I think a lot of people. I mean, I was raised in Western culture where Christianity is pretty prevalent, and so a lot of people think that that's a safe space. Just like a lot of people think that New Age is a safe space. Oh, it's love and light. And the thing is, I hate to say it to people, but there's really no totally safe space, and that you just have to use your discernment, and you have to use your discernment to find the people who really are, who can really be your safe support system, and to find the place, like if you need spiritual community, if it's a church or if it's some other type of group, to really do your discernment. And you don't have to make a final decision the first time you go. It doesn't have to be a forever decision. It can be like, well, let me try going once and see how see what it feels like, and then I can go another time and another time. And if it starts to seem like it's off for any reason, even if you don't know exactly why, I think you can give yourself permission to say, you know what, that the spiritual environment felt a little bit off. I think there's something weird going on there, and I don't want to go back because I don't think it's beneficial. And you may not ever know. Like maybe it's that sexual abuse was going on. You know, it's a church where there's sexual, or maybe it's that there's entity activity, or there's some occult, like dark occult stuff going on, and you might not ever know. But a lot of people have really strong gut feelings. That's what I call the spidey sense. Even if they're not psychic, you still have the ability to notice if something feels off or not
There's
safe.
people that unfortunately they have what I call, they walk in spiritual turbulence. And sometimes you'll meet somebody, whether it's those circumstances or other, and you're like, what is it about this person? And you'll look at them and they might even seem really nice, but there's just like, there's something telling me I need to get away from you. And and you might not, you can't logic it. How's that?
And you don't have to give a reason, because I think a lot of people are, and I used to be this way, too nice. I would feel like, well, I have to give a reason for why I'm leaving, for why I'm not sticking around. But one aspect of spiritual empowerment and spiritual safety is that if something doesn't feel right, you have the right to just leave. You don't have to explain why.
Sure. And as a matter of fact, if you get somebody that is very insistent, like, why are you leaving and why are you going? And there's like, that's your first tip off. Now I definitely need, to,
because I'm trying to get away from you
right now. Now it's like, otherwise they'd be like, okay, or if you ever want to come back, that's fine too, whatever, But if you get that, well, why? And you shouldn't, and that kind of like almost like a little bit of ownership over you kind of deal, and why? That's your first step. I was like, no, I'm right. And again, sometimes we don't know the bullet you dodged just because you dodged it. Sometimes there's no way to ever figure out, hey, my gut instinct did serve a purpose, because you just stopped going. Sometimes you have the benefit of later on somehow or other finding out about something maybe that happened with a group or whatever. But other times you just never find out that, man, thank God I just stepped back from that. And
Mm-hmm.
it turned out to be a good move on my part. You know, just like I tell everybody, you know, the person that had a bad feeling about getting on the plane, but got on the plane, there's nobody there to ever record when they you know, they're dead to say, hey, you know, I had a really bad feeling, or guess
Yeah.
what, I had a dream or something, but they talked themselves into getting on the plane. This is, you know, of course, an extreme example,
Mm-hmm.
but the have you ever had, let me ask you, are you close to Sedona at all?
I am driving distance, but not close. So I
Okay.
think I'm probably about 6 hours, maybe,
Okay.
because
Let me,
I'm
and
south. I'm the opposite direction of Sedona.
right,
I'm
you
out in the
guys.
country. Yeah.
And the reason I'm going to ask you this question is this, because everybody thinks of Sedona as being, very spiritual. But I've
Yeah.
had two people I've spoken to who told me that they've gone to Sedona and have gotten sick, really sick, that they had to
Mm-hmm.
leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I was wondering if you had ever come across that experience with other people in Sedona.
I haven't met anyone else who has gotten sick as a result of being in Sedona. I personally have been to Sedona once when I was
Mm-hmm.
researching what part of Arizona I wanted to move to. And I will speak on this. I am very sensitive, so that if I was going to get sick, I would have, But
Right.
I personally didn't enjoy the vortex energy that everybody raves about. I found
Okay.
it, and I have heard a lot of people say this. People who are very sensitive
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to many people who've said the same thing that I experienced, which is that the vortex energy didn't feel good. It felt kind of disorienting. It definitely did not feel calming or uplifting. It felt kind of wonky.
Well, this was
And
a man that even told me he got physically sick, like as in
yes, I
vomiting,
hear you.
like
Hmm.
it wasn't like, oh, I feel bad. No, it was like physically badly sick.
Yes.
And he says that once he left the area, it was like it stopped. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. That it well. And I knew that's you, like, physically ill. And so I personally haven't had that experience. The only thing that I've heard of is people not enjoying the vortex energy, where it made them feel a little bit woozy and weird.
Okay.
Uh, Whereas there are a lot of New Agers who are like, oh, they just rave about the energy in Sedona. And I'm not trying to put down Sedona.
No,
Like,
I'm
it's
not. I'm not.
it's
But you know what? Those
beautiful
two
there.
times, I was like, they're
It's
telling me
so
no. It was.
it's so beautiful there. And I actually, even though I've lived in Arizona for almost 5 years now, I still haven't for sure figured out where my exact place is. So the other
Mm-hmm.
day I thought, well, maybe I should move to Sedona. And that lasted about a split second. And I was like, nope, because of the energy there is, I don't think the energy is good for someone who is super sensitive.
And the
I
reason
think.
why I asked that, besides that, is like what you were saying,
Mhm.
that there could be people there. There's going to be the people that have a good energy, and then
Mhm.
have the ones that are pretending to have good energy, but not really.
I think
And
there's a
then
lot of that, actually.
yeah, right.
That's
And then
that's
when
my
people go
feeling.
there, they're like, "Oh my god," like, that it's so much that it's physically affecting them.
Yeah.
Um, and because I guess that comes back to what you were talking about, that there's a lot of people pretending one thing, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, to be positive, that positive light, and it's not. What's with them is not that, but we're going to go back because people, let's say, go to Sedona thinking everything is all, butterflies and
Positive.
positive energy
Yeah.
because it's Sedona. And you have to be really careful sometimes when you go to these places that are like totally. Here in Florida, we have a spiritualist town called Casadega.
Mm.
It's been around since like the early 1900s. People moved from New Jersey down here. And it's a really little small town. And a lot of spiritualist mediums live and work there. You could like get an appointment. I've been there a bunch of times. you'll go in some areas and you're fine, and there's some other areas that's like, oh my God,
Mhm.
I need to get out of here. And I
Mhm.
think part of that is that, because I think that, how can I say it? There's I don't know how to say this. There's a downside, I think, with so much spiritual that you
Well, the
draw in.
energies are amplified, like in
Yes.
Sedona and the area where you're talking about. It's like you turn up the volume. The energies are
Yeah.
amplified, so you've got like benevolent beings, but you have all of this false light and negative beings and all this
Yes.
energy coming through, and it's actually more intense. So all these issues that we've been talking about are actually stronger and more
Yeah.
intense in areas like that, in my observation.
Yes.
Even though I
Yes.
haven't been to that particular city,
No,
but
but yeah, it's like
yeah.
when you go there, it's very cool, and they have this little old hotel, which they didn't have a TV in the room, and I had to laugh because it's one of those things you overlook till you get to the room, and it's like, hey, where's the TV? Oh no, then you read the thing. There is no TV. It's set on purpose, by the way. It's not that it's, and it was like, oh, okay. It's really funny because, but anyway, it makes you get certain feelings, and you're like, well, you know what? Maybe it's my imagination. But then you drive around because it's a really small little town. I mean,
Mm.
and it's like, man, over here I'm good, but if I go over there to that little park that they got, it's like, holy crap. Yeah, I want to leave like right away, like, yeah,
Mhm.
that kind of thing. So I think
Mhm.
sometimes people, whether intentionally or unintentionally, because of what they do for a living, how's that,
Yes.
sometimes you draw in certain things where maybe whatever is there is trying to, I don't know, maybe even hook up to somebody that's maybe got their aura is thinged out. And that's my son again. And I
That's
can't say,
probably our sign because
yeah, I
we
know.
probably have to wrap it up
Yeah,
soon. Yeah,
I know.
that's
But
okay.
anyway, that's
Yeah.
usually, oh, he must, he knows it, but he doesn't know it. So it's like he's an adult. But when kids, I gotta talk to you like right now. Like right now. Why can't you talk to me? You're supposed to be
And
always
why didn't you call
available.
me back?
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, oh,
That's
mom, you've
funny.
got a life? What? You're doing something? Yeah,
Yeah.
that kind of deal.
Yeah.
But
So,
anyway, go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh, so you were talking about the feeling that when you go over to this certain area, you feel a
Yes.
little bit weird. Sometimes that can be an indication that an entity has stepped into your energy field, even if
Yes.
you don't necessarily see the entity. That there's actually two really common symptoms of when an entity is in your field or even trying to plug into you. And the first
Mm-hmm.
one is that you feel a little bit weird and woozy or disoriented or a little bit ungrounded or dizzy or even nauseous.
Yes.
And then the second symptom is kind of the opposite, where, and this is something that happens much more with false light entities and new age circles and that sort of thing, is what one of my past mentors calls spiritual anesthetic. And this is when an entity hooks into you and it emits these feelings of bliss and
Yes.
euphoria. So that,
Mm-hmm.
let's say you're at a new age channeling event and you're like, oh, I feel so amazing. How could this be bad?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, something is hooking into you and you go home with a hitchhiker. But the story that you were telling about feeling weird when you go over to this certain area, it reminded me of those two opposite types of symptoms that can happen when you're picking up the fact that there's an entity nearby at the very
You know
least.
what? It's one time I'm gonna say a real short story. This was a while back. I was at we had it was a people that we had gotten together up in an inn in Vermont of all places. And I remember we were doing this thing, and we're sitting around in the living room and everybody, and we're talking and everything, and they had it was one of those things that is basically the dusk had settled, so it was kind of darker in the room.
Yes.
And I remember
Yes.
I was sitting in a sofa, and it was like three or four of us on the sofa, and all of a sudden I swear I looked at the girl next to me. I had never met her before then, and I looked at her, and I said, you know what, I can't jump when her face was like trans. And I felt the drugs, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't nothing. I didn't want. First a couple of times I was like, oh, and then I looked at her and I went like this because her face was transformed.
Mhm.
She
Mhm.
looked like it wasn't it was here, but it was like a monstrous face. It was like,
Yes.
I remember I went like this and it was like, oh Mylene, and when you look away and I was like, okay, is it just gotten dark in here and I'm seeing stuff? And I did one
No,
of these look out
I
of the
think you were
corner of my
seeing
eye
something
thing.
real. Mm-hmm.
And I turned to my one friend who was there and I told her, hey, don't you feel like having a cigarette? Because she was a smoker. And she picked up on it right away. She looked at me. She goes, because she knew I would never have told her, hey, do you need a cigarette? She looked at me. She goes, yeah, okay. Let me go. Okay, I'll go with you. It was one of those. I'd never had that experience before or since.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
when you met this person,
It's
she's
creepy.
very nice, whatever. I didn't know anything. And I was like, holy crap. And
She might have had
ah,
an unfortunate situation of oppression where there was something with
yes,
her. And at that time of twilight where the light is dim, that's a
yes,
really common time to be able to, like, even if you're not normally like bright clairvoyant, if anyone
right.
is going to have a clairvoyant experience, it's at that time when the lighting is like that.
Well, it was like, I'm telling you, it was like, it was like, it wasn't like we were talking about anything that was
Oh,
conducive to
mhm.
that or
I
anything. And
know.
you just look and it's like, what? Um, I'm telling you, it was like, when you have somebody's face or a monstrous face superimposed
Mhm.
on somebody's
I've
features.
actually had that experience, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I've had a couple of experiences, not where it was a monster, but it was a demon
Okay, something like
superimposed
that.
over someone's
Yeah,
face.
it was like, and she was this
Yeah,
nice
it's very
blonde
creepy.
girl, very
Yeah,
nice looking,
yeah.
nothing like, and
Aw,
it
I
was
feel
like,
bad for her.
oh,
I hope she's okay.
yeah, no, this was many, God,
Many years ago.
it was many
Hmm.
years ago, but it was like one of those, like, okay. And yeah, so sometimes, yeah, when you least expect it, there you are. Maya, because my son obviously must, and then I'm going to call him. He's going to ask me some stupid question. I love
No
him, but
worries.
he's my baby. He's my youngest of all of them.
Hmm.
But anyway, you said you were planning, you're working on a book right now?
Yeah, I have 2 books out so far. The first book is Darkness Disguised as Light. And that is the book where I tell the story of the psychic attack by the Jinn in 2016. And there's a
Okay.
whole lot of that story that I didn't even get to today. It's a very
Okay.
interesting story. And then my second book is the Psychic Attack Sourcebook. And this
Okay.
is beyond any book that's out there about spiritual protection. And
What
that's
is,
on Amazon and Audible.
okay. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah.
And what's your, for my podcast listeners, what is your website?
My website is psychicprotectionsanctuary.com. And if they
Okay.
sign up for the newsletter on the website, there's a free masterclass that goes over a ton of information.
Perfect. Excellent. Excellent. Because you do offer on your website, you also offer classes. Am I correct?
Yeah, I
Or,
have one program that's called
mm-hmm.
Spiritual Empowerment Academy. I used to offer little classes, but what I found over the years is that when someone is going through major psychic attack issues,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely requires more than a quickie class, like a 1 hour video workshop. They need ongoing mentoring and also the huge library at their fingertips of all the information on how to clear all the different levels. Because sometimes when someone's dealing with entity interference or black magic or whatever, fill in the blank, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
paranormal issue is,
Yes.
they can burn frankincense and that's that like easy quick fix, but it's not a permanent solution. And
No.
they don't realize that maybe the root cause is in their ancestral line, or they
Yes.
have a past life where this thing attached to them. And so the Spiritual Empowerment Academy is super comprehensive so that like even people who've had severe issues have been able to clear themselves completely with the program.
Have
So I'm,
you, and I'm going to say this, I'm going to ask you this because you mentioned it, and I
yeah,
have heard of it, where sometimes when a pet dies, and
yeah,
I want to say where, how's this? The pet actually acts like a talisman or an amulet to deflect it. And this is when sometimes you will have a pet that dies or
Mhm.
something happens to that animal unexpectedly.
Mhm.
And I've heard, and it almost takes the bullet for you. How's this? And there's people I know going, think, oh my God, I'm not talking, anything can happen to an animal. I know that.
Mhm.
But I've
Mhm.
had circumstances where I've heard of situations where basically the animal deflects an attack kind of
Yes,
deal.
absolutely. And I mentioned earlier about my second major gin encounter in 2020 that I met, encountered this gin at a New Age bookstore. And unfortunately and sadly, it did cause one of my animals to pass away. But
Mm-hmm.
that was really horrible. But one of the things that was interesting afterwards was that my cat actually on the other side was protecting me, because after
There
that,
you
as
go.
soon as she died, the jinn couldn't get into my space any longer.
Yes.
So
Yes.
and even in a more general sense, beyond the paranormal, um, our pets sometimes take the bullet for us when it comes to illness. There's so many
Yes.
stories of people who've been diagnosed with a serious illness, and then all of a sudden the dog has that
Mm-hmm.
illness. The
Yes.
person suddenly is free of that diagnosis, and then the dog
Yes.
passes away. And that happened to my
Yes.
mother.
Really?
And yeah, this was years ago. My adopted mother, she had been diagnosed with cancer, or they were thinking that she had lymphoma, and then all
Mm-hmm.
of a sudden the dog had lymphoma, and then
Okay.
the dog died, and my mom was fine. And so
Yes.
I thought that was very interesting. But I think that sort of thing happens a lot. Our animals
Yes.
really love us.
Mm-hmm. Yes. 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 Again, it has been absolutely wonderful. You got to come back. We got to keep talking about this. We
We
got to
could
keep
talk
talking
for days
because
and days.
believe me, this is an area that's never covered, and people need to hear about this. Believe me,
Mhm.
it has been
Well, it was fun chatting with you today.
absolutely. It's been great, and we'll talk, and I'll send you the links to everything. Okay,
Great. Sounds wonderful.
take care. I gotta wrap this up real quick because my son. I can't wait to. I'll call him. I already told. And see, what's really funny is I text him back, and he says, "Has notifications silenced." Yeah, here we go. I can't wait. I'm gonna contact him in a few minutes, and I'm gonna wait to hear what he's gonna tell me. And it better be like, I gotta talk to you, because again, even if he's an adult, I'm supposed to be like, what do you mean you're not available to talk to me for something really, even if I'm telling him I'll call you later, it's got that automatic, text reply. But anyway, I think it was, let me tell you something. I kid you not. What she was talking about is so underreported in the psychic, ghost hunting, new age umbrella. She's absolutely right. This is so important. And the reason why I say this is because a lot of people, exactly what she said, people don't want to think that any of this has a dark side to it. That pretends not to be the dark side. All right. Will manipulate to draw you in for a host of reasons. All right. Whether the person really is a little psychopath in disguise as a good person, or like she was talking about this lady who genuinely doesn't, maybe is purposely not wanting to see or recognize maybe hints that she's maybe had along the way of that she's got something with her that's dark, and that could be manipulating her because maybe it's feeding off all these people that come to this one person. And see, she gives off the vibe like what Maya was saying of being a very nice person and very helpful, and this entity saying, well, you know what, as long as I let you keep that veneer or that energy, you're going to draw in more people for me to, you know, attach to. So I can't get hot and heavy on the dark thing, because otherwise even the people that don't get it will just be like, oh, there's something about you, lady. So yeah. And I absolutely agree with her that in some cases, you just get attacked because, you might recognize me for what I am. And same thing, the thing about the cults, people, sometimes you'll hear people that are kind of simple-minded and you could kind of understand how they ended up in a cult. But then other times you'll speak to some people, especially the ones that either leave or are extracted, that you look, when they talk about their experiences, you're thinking, man, you don't sound like a stupid person. How did you get to fall into this cultish mentality? And I tell you right now, I guarantee you, I'm positive, at the top of the pyramid of the cults, they've got stuff attached to them, guaranteed. All right, 100%. They've got more one entities working with them, using them, possessing them, obsessing them. And this is how basically they become glib of tongue and are able to say the right thing to the right person the right way and to draw in, followers and keep them. It's not just drawing them in. All right. It's keeping them. And then you hear about these people that belong to cults for years and they work for them for free. You hear it all the time where there's basically the sexual angle to, if you belong, you all of a sudden you're you become you can be visited by one of the whoever they're sexually. You hear people enduring things or putting up with things or doing things that you're like, there was nothing in you that kind of like rebelled at some point, and again, you thinking, how do they get away with that? And it's a lot of time what is, who was it the other day I was watching? There's this, God, this happened, I want to say, I can't remember now. It was out of California. Anyway, it was in California. And this guy, to look at this man who was, and then ended up, eventually he got arrested and he's basically, skipped bail, skipped whatever, and he disappeared. Like, what else is new? When you looked at this guy, he was nothing to look at. Personality-wise, nothing. And he had this cult thing going on. So again, and that's the part that you could say, well, okay, part of it could be somebody that maybe he feels abandoned, doesn't have any family, doesn't have friends. Maybe they're going to take him in and they're going to give him a purpose. But this guy is like, how? That's because of what walks with them. What is the power behind the throne? All right. And it's almost the knowing of what to say to each person, like exactly what Maya was describing, that clicks in their brain, in their mind, the right thing. Like, I know that your weakness or your deficiency or that wound that you have in your psyche is whatever, fill in the blank. And I know exactly what to say to smooth over that hurt or that wound or the vacuum that you might have, emotional, spiritual. And maybe that, what you just said to that person, you go over here and you have that one-on-one, and yeah, you might have, what they'll say overall to everybody. But then when they pull you aside, like our special time, I'm going to tell you the right thing, that it's like, and then of course you stick around and you get caught up in it, and then you do. And then, and then of course, then you'll have other cult members that even at some point down the road, especially if they've been around there for a while, and they witness certain things, that then they get scared because they realize, if I ever try to leave, if at some point they kind of like come up for air, and they realize, if I try to leave, these people are going to come after me. And how's this? Not that the group will say, oh, I'm going to, you can't leave. That in other words, they've witnessed them going after other people that have tried to leave. All right. Which, by the way, there's people that's all they do. As a matter of fact, I've interviewed people. I have a friend of mine who does that, which is extractions out of cults. All right? Extraction out of cults. And, everybody thinks also, by the way, that the cult thing was just a thing of the 70s. Like you heard about this guy Jones who took his people to Guyana. And there was other cults out there at that time. One of them ended up going to jail, but by the government there. But, everybody thinks that kind of cultish thinking, or the most recent one, the people, the ones with a comet that all committed suicide. Oh my God, their name escapes me now. But anyway, everybody thinks that, believe it or not, cults, they just learn how to disguise themselves better. All right. As far as their appearance, but the same thing that, in other words, there is no you. What's that? There is no I in team or some crap like that. All right. They really mean it. Like if you ever try to exhibit any type of individuality, yeah, it's like, oh, what's wrong with you? We got to fix that. And if you don't get fixed, then we might have to do something about it. That's me. That's the writer in me thinking. Then those are the people that, I don't want either they kick you out sometimes. And sometimes people, because you have to understand that when these people go into these cults, most of the time, they are, because unfortunately some people, they don't have ties with their family of origin. But even if they did, once you become part of the cult, they're like, we're your family now. And they basically lose touch with their family of origin. So sometimes their families have no idea who they're with, where they're at. My point being that if you ever, at some point down the roads, realize, man, you wake up, how's that? Or something happens and you can't get pulled back in. And they realize, hey, before you blab on us, or God forbid, get any of the other members to realize that this is a cult, we might need to get rid of you. Okay. And you might think, well, that's kind of difficult to do if nobody knows who you are really and where you're at, or that because you've lost touch with people that actually could say, hey, I haven't heard from this person because the last thing you were in that cult and they, you cut everybody outside of that cult away. Who's going to say or put in a missing persons report? Nobody. And by the way, that is part of the cult mentality. You're very insulated. You don't tell anybody even your real name. Nobody knows anything about you. And they could say, oh, we sent Charlie or Mary over to this other compound or somewhere on a retreat, and for all you know, you were fed to the hogs. That's me being a writer, but that's not too far from the truth. Anyway, please, I'm going to have a link to Maya's website on the credits of the show. Visit her. Let me tell you, I guarantee you, if you're ever going to do any type of paranormal work, or you go into places where there's spiritual turbulence, this is a good book to read. This is a good books to read. I'm telling you, it is. All right. Guaranteed, because what she's talking about exists very much, and people's refusal to believe, whether you're a ghost hunter or anything like that, refusal to think that something like that can actually happen. Big mistake. She's got it. All right, guys, I hope you like this show. Let me go call my son and find out what's the emergency. All right. Thank you so much for being part of my audience. You're all wonderful, and I will see you next week. Till then, take care.